For years, the world couldn't stop talking about them. Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston, Hollywood's golden couple. From red carpets to magazine covers, they were the picture of perfection, the love story everyone believed would last forever. But when it all came crashing down in 2005, it felt like the end of a fairy tale. Rumors, betrayal, heartbreak, every headline told a different story. Fans chose sides, the media spun endless theories, and both stars retreated into silence. What really happened between the world's most adored couple? Was it fame, pressure, or something deeper, something only time could reveal? Now, after nearly 2 decades of silence, Brad Pitt has finally broken his quiet reflection, and what he's said has shocked even those who thought they knew the truth. For the first time, he's speaking openly about the pain, the guilt, and the lessons that shaped the man he's become. It's not a tabloid story anymore. It's a confession of love, regret, and rediscovery. Behind the glitz of Hollywood and the chaos of celebrity lies a human story of 2 people who once loved deeply, lost each other, and found peace in very different ways. This is the untold truth of Brad Pitt's reflections on his marriage, his mistakes, and the one woman who changed his heart forever, Jennifer Aniston. It was the late 1990s, a time when Hollywood was still wrapped in glamour, mystery, and movie magic. Brad Pitt was already a superstar, the heartthrob of Legends of the Fall, the tough guy from Fight Club, and one of the most admired men in the world. Jennifer Aniston, meanwhile, was America's sweetheart. Her role as Rachel Green in Friends had made her a household name. Charming, funny, and effortlessly relatable. 2 of the biggest stars on Earth, each with their own spotlight, didn't seem like they'd ever cross paths. And yet, as fate often does, it brought them together quietly, without cameras or crowds. In 1998, their agents introduced them, thinking they might get along. What followed wasn't instant passion, it was something gentler. 2 people who understood the loneliness of fame found comfort in each other's company. Their first date was private, away from the flashing lights. Brad would later recall how simple it felt, how refreshing it was to be with someone who didn't need anything from him but honesty. Jennifer, too, said she knew from that very first meeting that there was something special about him. By the time they made their first public appearance together in 1999, the world lost its breath. The golden boy and the golden girl, smiling, glowing, seemingly made for each other. They married the following year in a beautiful Malibu ceremony, filled with laughter, music, and fireworks that lit up the Pacific sky. For a while, it truly looked perfect. Their home was filled with art, laughter, and a shared dream of a simple, grounded life, despite the chaos of Hollywood. In interviews, Jennifer called Brad her sunshine, while Brad spoke about how much he admired her strength, warmth, and humor. But even as the cameras captured their joy, cracks were forming beneath the surface, small, invisible ones that fame has a way of widening. The world didn't see the exhaustion of long movie shoots, the pressure of being Hollywood's perfect couple, or the quiet disagreements that began to grow into emotional distance. Both were ambitious. Brad was drawn toward more serious, complex roles, stories that challenged him emotionally and intellectually. Jennifer, though equally talented, often found herself typecast by the industry as the funny, charming girl next door. Their worlds began to pull in different directions, quietly, like 2 stars drifting apart in the same sky. By 2004, Brad was filming Mr. and Mrs. Smith, a movie that would change everything. It was there he met Angelina Jolie, and the chemistry between them was undeniable. The rumors exploded instantly. Brad and Jennifer tried to ignore the headlines, insisting everything was fine. But behind closed doors, things were unraveling. Jennifer later admitted that she could feel the emotional distance, not necessarily betrayal, but detachment. "You can sense when someone's heart is elsewhere," she once said softly. In January 2005, Brad and Jennifer announced their separation, calling it a mutual and loving decision. But for millions of fans around the world, it felt like heartbreak. The fairy tale had ended, and no one really understood why. In the years that followed, Jennifer focused on healing, while Brad moved on to a new chapter of his life that would be just as complicated and controversial. But deep down, something in him never truly let go of that first great love, the one that had been built not on fame, but on friendship, laughter, and quiet understanding. For Brad Pitt, it would take decades to realize that sometimes the hardest thing about love isn't losing it, it's understanding why you let it go. When Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston announced their separation in early 2005, the world didn't just react, it erupted. Overnight, they went from being Hollywood's favorite couple to the center of a media hurricane. Every magazine cover, every late-night show, every gossip column dissected their breakup like it was a public event. And when Brad was seen growing close to Angelina Jolie on the set of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the headlines exploded. Brad betrays Jennifer. The affair that shattered Hollywood. The world had chosen its villain, and Brad Pitt became the face of heartbreak and betrayal. But behind the cameras, the story was far more complicated. Brad wasn't proud of how things unfolded. In fact, he later admitted that the transition from one relationship to another was handled poorly. "I wasn't living an interesting life," he confessed years later. "I was hiding behind the image of perfection." At that time, Brad was struggling with something deeper than love. He was questioning who he really was. Fame had become both a blessing and a curse. On the surface, he had it all: success, beauty, and power. But inside, he felt lost. "I was chasing roles, chasing approval," he later said. "But I didn't know what actually made me happy." His relationship with Angelina Jolie brought new purpose, humanitarian work, fatherhood, and a family that grew to 6 children. Yet even as the world watched Brangelina become a phenomenon, Brad's personal struggles only deepened. He began to drown in expectations of being the perfect husband, perfect father, perfect icon. Jennifer, meanwhile, was navigating her own quiet storm. Every red carpet smile hid pain. Every interview came with a question she didn't want to answer. People painted her as the woman left behind when in truth she was simply trying to heal. In later years, she admitted, "It was painful, but I don't regret it. I learned how strong I can be when life breaks your heart." For Brad, guilt lingered, not because of scandal, but because of timing, the choices he made when he wasn't emotionally ready. He once said, "I take full responsibility for the things I did that hurt others." You can't build peace without owning your part in the chaos. The public continued to pit Jennifer and Angelina against each other, as if their lives were one endless tabloid competition. But in reality, time was healing both wounds, just not in ways the media could see. Brad's marriage to Angelina eventually collapsed under its own weight. After more than a decade together, they divorced in 2016. It was another heartbreak, another public unraveling. This time, though, Brad faced it differently. He turned inward, went through therapy, and gave up alcohol, admitting that his biggest battle was with himself. In interviews years later, he described that period as an awakening. "I hurt people. I hurt myself. But pain can be a teacher if you're brave enough to listen." For the first time, Brad Pitt wasn't talking like a movie star. He was talking like a man who had finally stripped away the fame, the perfection, the mask. By the late 2010s, something unexpected began to happen. The tension between Brad and Jennifer started to fade. They began to reconnect, quietly and respectfully, not as lovers, but as two people who had shared something profound. There were phone calls, friendly check-ins, and moments of warmth that fans couldn't help but notice. But what no one knew was that Brad's reflections were growing deeper, that he had started looking back on his past not with regret alone, but with a kind of gratitude. Because, as he would later say, sometimes losing something beautiful is what teaches you how to be a better man. By the time Brad Pitt reached his mid-50s, he was no longer the man who had graced magazine covers and broken box office records. The sharp edges of youth had softened. The arrogance that once came with fame had faded. What remained was a quieter, humbler man, one who had faced his demons and was finally learning to forgive himself. In those years, Brad began to talk more openly about his past, not to justify, but to understand. He admitted that during the height of his fame, he had lost sight of who he was. "I was running from my emotions," he said in one interview. "I thought success would fill the emptiness, but it only made it louder." When asked about his marriage to Jennifer Aniston, he didn't dodge the question. Instead, he spoke with rare honesty and warmth. "Jen is an incredibly giving, loving person," he said softly. "We were both finding ourselves in a world that doesn't make that easy. I wasn't good at it then. It wasn't an apology in words, it was an apology in tone, the kind that comes from a place of truth." By then, Jennifer had long moved on. She had rebuilt her life with grace, choosing privacy over publicity, peace over pain. She often said she had no regrets, that everything that happened shaped her into who she was meant to be. Still, when their paths began to cross again, at industry events, award shows, and quiet gatherings, something remarkable happened. There was no bitterness, no awkward distance. Just kindness, shared laughter, and the familiarity of two souls who had weathered life's storms and come out softer. The 2020 SAG Awards became the moment fans couldn't stop talking about. Brad and Jennifer's brief backstage reunion, a smile, a touch of hands, and a look of genuine affection, sent the internet into a frenzy. For a brief moment, the world believed in fairy tales again. But behind that fleeting image was something far deeper than nostalgia. Those smiles weren't about rekindled romance. They were about closure, the kind of peace that comes when both people finally heal. Sources close to the actors revealed that Brad had reached out privately to Jennifer long before that event, simply to say, "I'm sorry." It wasn't dramatic or emotional. It was honest. He wanted her to know he recognized how much pain he had caused, and that he admired how she had handled everything with such dignity. Jennifer, ever graceful, reportedly told him there was nothing to forgive, that life had unfolded exactly as it was meant to. "We were kids," she told friends. "We loved each other, but we both had to grow." Those who know Brad say that moment changed him. For years he had carried guilt like a quiet weight, not for leaving, but for not understanding what he had until it was gone. Jennifer's forgiveness, even in silence, became one of the most healing moments of his life. In later interviews, Brad began speaking about gratitude and humility more than success. He credited therapy, faith, and time for helping him rediscover empathy, for others and for himself. "You can't rewrite your past," he said, "but you can choose to live differently because of it." And though fans often fantasize about what could have been, both Brad and Jennifer seem content with what is. Their connection today isn't romantic, it's spiritual. Two people who once loved each other deeply, broke apart painfully, and found a way back to friendship without resentment. Sometimes, the most powerful apology doesn't come with tears or promises. It comes with peace, and that's what Brad Pitt finally found. In Jennifer Aniston's forgiveness, in his own acceptance, and in the quiet understanding that love, even when it ends, can still change you forever. Years after the world had stopped talking about Brangelina and the chaos of celebrity gossip had faded into memory, Brad Pitt finally opened up about what truly haunted him. Not fame, not failure, but Jennifer Aniston. In a rare, soul-bearing interview, Brad spoke softly, choosing his words carefully, like someone unwrapping an old wound that had finally stopped bleeding. "People always ask about regrets," he said. "I don't like that word. But if I could go back, I'd tell my younger self to slow down, to appreciate what I had before I chased what I thought I wanted." He paused and smiled faintly. "Jen was good to me. Better than I realized. It wasn't a confession of lost love. It was a recognition of lost time." The shocking truth, as the headlines later called it, wasn't scandalous at all. It was heartbreakingly simple. Brad had taken Jennifer's stability and kindness for granted. He had mistaken peace for boredom and chaos for passion. He explained that in his 30s he was restless, chasing meaning through adventure, work, and new experiences. "I thought growth meant moving on," he admitted. "But sometimes growth means staying still and facing yourself." That line struck a chord around the world. for millions who had watched their love story unfold. From their picture-perfect wedding in Malibu to their quiet heartbreak, it was the closure they didn't know they needed. Insiders close to Brad say he now keeps a framed photograph from their early days, not as a token of regret, but as a reminder of innocence, a time when love was simple, before fame magnified every flaw and temptation whispered louder than truth. Jennifer, on her part, has also spoken kindly about Brad in recent years. In an interview promoting one of her projects, she was asked about him directly. She laughed softly and said, "We check in on each other. There's no bitterness, just history and respect. I'm proud of who we both became." To the public, those words sounded polite. But to those who truly listened, they carried a quiet grace, a kind of emotional maturity that comes only when the heart has healed completely. Brad, meanwhile, has become more reflective with age. He talks about spirituality, accountability, and the importance of forgiveness. "You can't build anything new until you clean up what's behind you," he once told a journalist. "I didn't always do that right, but I'm learning." He doesn't talk about getting Jennifer back. He talks about understanding her, and more importantly, understanding the version of himself who once let her go. The truth Brad finally revealed wasn't about infidelity or jealousy. It was about self-discovery, the painful realization that love isn't something to conquer, but something to protect. That sometimes the person who was right for you didn't leave. You did. Fans still root for them, replaying old photos and clips, imagining what could have been. But both Brad and Jennifer have made peace with the past. They found a friendship more valuable than a rekindled romance, one built on empathy, not expectation. In Hollywood, where most stories end in scandal, theirs has become something rare, a story of healing. When asked one last time what he would say to Jennifer today if given the chance, Brad smiled with that familiar, quiet sincerity. "Thank you," he said, "for loving me when I didn't love myself." Those words were enough. No scriptwriter could have written a better ending, because the truth wasn't explosive or dramatic. It was human, and that's the shocking truth Brad Pitt finally revealed, that the greatest love stories don't always end with reunion. Sometimes they end with understanding, forgiveness, and two hearts walking in different directions, but carrying the same peace forever.